Hello everybody, welcome back to From Rhythm to Algorithm. We continue on with our derivation. What is sensorality? What does sensorality stabilize? So we have a whole episode, the bass of E. We have this guitar, it is tuned to standard E. We have the natural log in mathematics, the base of E. And so that's exactly where that verbiage comes from, the base of E. And now we're going to derive sound, or kind of do this fun little exercise where we prove wrong the saying that all of the low-hanging fruit has been picked. If you're not familiar with the phrase, I'd imagine most people are, but just a saying specifically in research that all of the big, simple, major questions have been answered. Like clearly nobody had come along and say rhythm, regulates all of efficiency. The inverse of that is vibration. Nobody could say that. Nobody could say, hey, right? The speed of light has an inverse. There has to be a universal minimum speed limit. Nobody could pick any low-hanging fruit, and obviously it's all gone. So today we're going to prove that wrong again and pick some more low-hanging fruit. Again, overall exploring what is a function, right? We have a base. Sometimes we say base, sometimes we say basis. Basis is basics linguistically. It's a direct natural definition. But you start with something universally, right? We can't do this. We're not going to rederive all of the physics. We're going to stick with our little exercise for now. But the alphabet, right? Why is it in the order that it is, right? How can our clear geometric relationship of E and A being geometric inverses? You can literally see the geometry of the infinity sign. What can we make of that? How can we apply that? And what other insight can we draw? Let's take a step back and look at the alphabet. Again, why is the alphabet the alphabet? What is the alphabet? It is a representation of sound, right? We have this irreducibility of sound. We also have this irreducibility of syllability and of word, but for now we're focusing on the units of syllables, sounds. We have a clear differentiation. Vibration resonates, consonance doesn't resonate. And so the only sounds you can make are vibrations. Vibrations are vowels. So how many vowels are there? A, E, I, O, U, and sometimes Y. Once again, that is a very convincing, super mathematically rigorous explanation of how many vowels there are. First, what are vowels? Well, they're vibrations. That's it's empirically true, right? It is what it is. But that looks like a low-hanging fruit. Let's pick that one off. And so historically, the alphabet is some sort of consolidation of information. Hey, we have these sounds, we have these words, they're irreducible to meaning, and now we're going to have our components and represent them with letters. And that is what we have called geometric linguistics, this association of shape to sound. And so we already have that, right? We're just looking at this overall refining process of language as a whole. And so the alphabet is a keyboard, right? The base of key is E. Literally our guitar and literally the sound key is E with consonants in front of it. And so how many letters are unique? How many sounds of the English alphabet are unique? Well, let's go through and say them. Specifically, our base is E, so how many letters uniquely pronounced, or how many letters just produce the sound E? A, B, C, D, E is E, F, no, G, that's E, H, no, I, no, J, no, K, no, L, M, N, O, P, yes, Q, no, R, no, S, T, U, V, W, X, Y, Z. So I emphasize the ones with E, but you can do the simple exercise yourself. But out of the 26 characters, letters, 9 of those are just E. And then we can expand that and generalize that to all of our vowels. So how many have the sound, or just are uniquely the sound A, or not uniquely, but have consonants in front of the vowel A? A, H, right? H, J, K, and I think there's one more. or J, K, H, and A. Those are the 4. Yeah, so there's 4 that have the sound A. How about the sound O, the vowel O? It's just the letter O. So that's kind of unique. We just have one thing there. We have 9 with E, 4 with A, 1 with O, just being itself O. How about I? We have the letter I, that's I. And now, here's the lowest hanging of the fruit, and sometimes Y. Is Y a unique sound? No. Y is I. And so that is the lowest hanging fruit that still remained in all of fundamental research. The letter Y is not a vowel. It's not a unique sound. It's just I with Y in front of it. But no fear, Brad is here to pick all of the low-hanging fruit while you guys go build super colliders and see, hey man, can we stabilize this anti-dark super quasar pet for a petabyte second? Yep, the letter Y is never a vowel. It's sometimes Y, nope, never a Y. Proof by empirical demonstration. The letter Y does not represent a unique sound. But continuing on, the sound I, or the letters that you say the sound I, are 2. The letter I and Y. You have the letter U, you have Q, and you have W, which again, that has its own W hyphen, that's another thing. And again, the letter Y, that's why you have like eclec in like other languages. It's not like a letter. It's certainly not a vowel. And it's like, that's why that happens. Because you just say I with w in front. But then we have what I have called naturally from the Cyrillic alphabet, like the backwards E, and I like that symbol. The reason I use that because it's not the letter E with again, I would say a grave, but that would make sense. It would be like the French accent, a grave over like a, eh. So either with the French accent or just the backwards E. That's what I've called it naturally. But like again, I'm labeling all of the unique sounds represented by the English alphabet. And so for the sound, right, I'll just read just all of the letters. F, L, M, N, S, X. All right, so that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So that's 6 of the 26 sounds represented by the English alphabet with as like the vowel. And so again, it's not presented as A, E, I, O, and U, but now we can ask the question, well, why is that a thing? Right, why is that vowels? What we can start with is our empirical evidence. We have this differentiation, the English alphabet represented by these letters. What unique sounds are we saying? And so for U, for and then I just have one, that is like, I have a question mark, but just meaning it's unique to me, is the letter R. And that's just because R is more like ah, but I just have ah, again with the downward accent sign, or just a 1 of 26. And so we have the straight up vowel O, and there's no other letters that produce that phonetic, that sound. And then the letter R, you have that sound as a verb, right? Is, are. So I don't know if that's a thing. Probably is. Again, just pointing out all of the logic present. And so then we can ask the question again, why? So we've said the base of E. E definitely has the most pronunciations from the letters, but is that base, right? Typically when you're thinking cardinality or cardinality, magnitude, base having less elements than a range set or an output set. Again, we balked at the verb or at the word range, but then I went back to saying range last time. Again, just articulating literally any logic that comes to mind. But now we have, again, clear the amount of unique sounds in the English alphabet, right? We've been saying this iteration limit is 7, right? That's 7 unique sounds. E, A, O, I, U, E, and ah. And again, it's R, and that's correct. But the R is like something uniquely different in that analysis to me. And then the letter O being a vowel, being itself. And like, what is the identity element in this set? Does that make sense? because E is clearly the most, right? That is the mode, is E, right? That is right back to our guitar, like directly, literally. But for cardinality, right, if we have 9 E sounds, why is that bass? Right? Was our bass more or less than range? Again, range is derivative from bass, so it has to be equal to or less than. Again, what we're trying to derive functionality. Again, this is cool. I don't know. This was something for me. I don't remember doing this. I don't know if I did this explicitly for speciality. But our big results, right? A, E, I, O, and U, and sometimes Y. Y is never a vowel. It is not a unique sound. It is not a unique vibration. There are clearly 7 unique tones or 7 unique vibration starter places. Bases, not bases. Again, still bass and basis and basics. It's still something. 7 unique tones. Y is not a vowel. Yeah. And then this relationship to bass and range, what we've called the base of E, seems solid, but the consequence I'm coming to is that range, again, is derivative from bass. But then the overall cardinality, if you have, where we have a set amount of tones we can make, but you have infinitely many songs you can write. So to me, that would be the output of how many songs you could write would be range. And so what chronology, analytical aspect am I, Brad, not putting in the right place? What am I missing? We've resolved this before. What is it? But that was a cool little exercise, and I've pointed out the logic of what that analysis has provided. So continuing along, a tone is a vibration, a note is a vibe. More is more. More syllables than bass is comprehensivity. So that's what I just freestyled talking about, is again, this cardinality relationship of bass and range. When we have our clear empirical consolidation, tuning, standard tuning E, natural logarithm bass E, literally that produces the verbiage, bass E. And so E is the bass, but is bass more or less cardinally than range? Unique, or is it unique? Or like, what is something? Something function. What is a function? Holy shit, what is a function? But more is more. Again, the universe is simple. There's no complexity. We're just trying to get our concepts in the right area. And the simple fact is, if you have more syllables, I want to call that linguistic range, and then you derive the bass from the range. Again, seems to make sense. This chronological relationship of bass or basis to range is still ever present in our derivation. But more is more. And then you kind of get all of these societal emergence of like logical statements. I remember I put this on email back when I was in Dublin, go into Lifetime Fitness, and it'll say less is more. No, more is more, less is less. But the conceptualization of, right, if you cut down waste, you have less stuff, but then you'll get more out of it, is kind of like the logic. And so all of that kind of emerges from this relationship. But for the universe is simple, more is more syllables. We're deriving the stabilized component, the stabilized syllability of sensorality from more to less. How that relates to bass and range, we'll continue on our mathematical exploration. Bass is less than what? Same type of thing we were just saying. Eyes are key. Eyes are keys. Again, I want to say that's a natural definition, but it wasn't, believe it or not, it wasn't enough for me to label it very instinctually like that. But eyes are yes. That is a natural definition. That part is, right? Eyes is literally E, yes. Sensorality, eyes, like I'm eyeing that. But that produces, right, sensorality, eyes, orality, eyes, which is, again, we're getting to this fundamental conceptual inversion where we flip the letters and then it locks in our concepts correctly. But orality is clearly, your eyes are not oral, right, directly, literally. But sensorality, eyes, like life is eyeing something, that's a phrasing you say, and then directly, orality is not your eyeballs. And so again, language is directly literal. It's funny, I mean, this reduction, we're getting to this just direct demonstration. Sensorality says, orality says. Sensorality says yes. What is stereo? And so for Analytical completeness, this was another thing that came to me when I was just out walking around. The actual intuition was, again, the shapes of the E and the O, the E and the A, real. We've derived that, and then now we have REO. And so is this the shape of the E to the O to the E to the A? But what is it? What is a stereo? What is stereo to audio? Right? Stereos play audio. Again, emphasizing the word forms. E to the A, EA to EO. Evisceration is visceral. Natural definition, no, we've come across that before. Cereal, visceral. Emphasizing the word forms. Cereal is a grocery. Sensoralities are groceries. Grocery is another interesting word. You know, eat that booty up like groceries. The song that went viral, mega viral. But just what are groceries? It's another one of those, again, the linguistic construction, the letters to the conceptualization, right? What makes a food item a grocery? It always just has, again, certain words just have, it's just like, I don't know, it feels different. But regardless, the actual exercise of going through the low-hanging fruit of the alphabet, again, there are only 7 unique sounds. You can only make vibration. You can only make the vowel sound, and then you modify that vowel, that vibration with consonants. And so then we demonstrated this uniqueness of after 7, you just repeat stuff. And so that is very clear. The English alphabet only has 7 tones. And then you might say, well, Brad, well, that's the English alphabet, which is correct. I mean, that's not a complete categorization. But it is a complete categorization for the English alphabet. But again, all of this resolution comes with the stabilizing definition. And then as a whole, again, why English is the language of science is this filtration, this iteration of the sequence, the chronology of the E and the A, being this fundamental stability of 2, linguistically, numerically. And so we continue on with our derivation. My rights continue to be profoundly violated. It is completely illegal. I continue to beg for a little bit of money, to eat properly, to sleep properly, and to work. This is first principle science as direct as it gets. This is the coolest shit ever. Give me my fucking money, you bottom-feeding thieves. Thank you for watching. See you on the next one.